to explain what it is and show you real quickly 2 super simple ways that you would be able to make an HDR through Lightroom and one other piece of software. You know, I've talked in the past about how your eye can see in the shadows, they can see the highlights. Our eyes process those things super fast. Cameras don't. And HDR is one way where you can take those overexposed, underexposed, and correctly exposed frames, mash them into one kind of super photo that does represent the shadows, the highlights, and the midtones all very correctly. So that's what HDR is, high dynamic range. So obviously you need some photos to start with. The best way to do this is to shoot with what's called bracketing. 3 quick exposures, 1 exposed correctly, 1 overexposed, 1 underexposed. It really helps if you've got a camera that shoots really fast frames. Then you take those photos in RAW format, you take them to the computer, and I'll show you how to stick those things together. Here in Lightroom, if you look, I've got 3 photos here that I took of the downtown Minneapolis skyline, a little sunrise. So this first photo right here was exposed with approximately the correct exposure. And the second one was underexposed by 1 stop. And the third one was overexposed by 1 stop. So you can see the different ranges in values, especially in those shadowy areas that each of those 3 have. Very simply in Lightroom, we select all 3 of those. If you go up to Photo, down to Photo Merge to HDR, if there were cars or people moving, it will do its best to de-ghost and kind of line those up. Auto Align, you can see right here, I've selected an Auto Tone. After it has created that preview, you can see some of the highlights are still retaining some of the texture. Down here in some of those real dark shadowy areas, it has pulled those shadows out a little bit. So we're going to hit merge and it will automatically send this back to Lightroom in its original folder. So after it has created that HDR, it brought that back into the original location. It sent this in as a RAW file that we can edit just like the original photos. One other piece of software that I use with even more creative control is something called Photomatix Pro. It has a plugin that is compatible with Lightroom, so I will do this. I'm going to select those same 3 photos, and then I'm going to say export with preset, and I'm going to send it to Photomatix Pro. So I'm going to just say export. I'm going to let it do its thing. Got a lot of different presets made over here that can get really, really funky looking. You can do some really, really crazy stuff. I like to keep things pretty basic without going over the top crazy. You can do your individual controls on your contrast, the strength of the overall use of HDR, tone compression, lighting effects, luminance, and you can make all of these adjustments as you go. These are all great options. Just like the actual Lightroom HDR function, you're going to go down and hit finish and re-import. Photomatix Pro has sent this back to Lightroom just like the actual Lightroom interface did. This is the version that came from Photomatix Pro, and you can see that it did a lot of the same things. Lifted the shadows, brought some texture and stuff to the sky in those highlighted areas, and just overall balanced out what the human eye is actually seeing. Let's take a look at the Photomatix Pro version compared to the Lightroom version. First of all, here's Photomatix Pro. Here's the Lightroom version. You can go in here now and work with your normal develop settings because this is a TIFF file. Photomatix Pro definitely gives you more creative control, but the Lightroom integrated HDR function is suitable for many, many applications. So that's it. Thanks for joining me for this week's 3 Minutes on Thursday. I apologize that I'm doing it out here in the middle of this field. I'm also getting ready for a few trips coming up. My office is a mess, and I just would rather not have to expose the world to my unorganization of gear that's sitting on the floor. So if you're enjoying these, hit the subscribe button. Appreciate you stopping by. We'll see you here again next week.